I never know how to start. Good, good morning, Ed. How you doing? Welcome to Confectionery Speaking.
Good morning. I'm doing great, thank you.
Cool. So this morning we're talking with Ed Wilson, formerly of Aarhus Karsham, but a longtime PMCA member and decision maker, an important person in the PMCA. And we're going to talk about a little bit about you today. Is that okay, Ed?
Sure. Let's get into it.
So, easy question to start with. Like, how long have you been involved in the PMCA?
It's interesting. I pegged my first PMCA meeting in about 1982-ish, 81, 82, 83. We were still at Franklin and Marshall, and that was my first conference. I mean, when I stop and think about it, it's been a long time, but it doesn't seem that long. It's been great.
What were you doing at the time, aside from going to PMCA? What were you doing in 1982?
At that time, I worked for a little-known company. It was called US Cocoa Corporation. And they were owned by a French group called Barry Cocoa. At the time I started to get involved in PMCA, I had been hired as a assistant warehouse manager. And then shortly after that, they had decided to expand just their cocoa operation into a compound coating operation. So they sort of enlisted me to see if I was interested in possibly, heading up that department and growing with it as we built from nothing in a warehouse up to a production line. And I was just totally, appreciative of that opportunity. And, to be quite honest, it was during those early years where at this point I had no confectionery training. I'd had some food training, but not confectionery. So one of my colleagues at that time said, you ought to check out this organization called PMCA. And there's another sister organization called AACT. They give these presentations, you can learn a lot. And that was really instrumental in launching my career into the confectionery aspect. And so we grew that little compound coating operation in South Jersey. And that company today is, most people would recognize it as Barry Callebaut.
So who do we owe a debt of thank you to for, recommending the PMCA to you, right? Because I think you've been involved for a very long time, but you've become really integral in the organization. And without that change, it doesn't happen, right?
One of the three executive people at the time was a gentleman by the name of Ed Smith. And he had worked at Hershey as he came out of college. And at the time, he was slightly younger than me, but, at least he had some...
He probably still is slightly younger than you.
Yeah, and he still is slightly younger than me. And so he had the background and the technical abilities to convince the rest of the group that this is a fairly easy transition, not heavily capital laden. So we started down that path with his basic knowledge. And then it was my colleague by a gentleman by the name of Harry Sibley, and he had the experience of PMCA. So, with his push and, agreement with people like Ed Smith, they said this is something that, everything that we're doing here now, they cover in PMCA in one aspect or another. And because you can imagine, I was faced with all kinds of new terms and technology, and I'm going I had no clue what you're talking about, but I'll do whatever you want.
You came out of school, your undergraduate studies were in things like industrial management, right? So it wasn't specifically food related. You weren't a food scientist.
Now, when I get out of the service, I did want to go into a food science degree. In Philadelphia at that time, really Drexel was the only university that held a food science curriculum. Unfortunately, having to only be able to go to night school because I was working and had a young family, going full time, and I could not take that food science degree in night school. So I figured, well, the best thing to do is just continue my studies at night and, just go into the industrial management, because no matter which aspect of food I go into, I'll still need those skills. And so that's what really led me to industrial management.
I described my first PMCA meeting like walking into, a conference and being a little intimidated, to be completely honest with you. I wasn't the smartest guy in the room. People knew a lot more stuff than me. you know, and that's been something that other people have expressed too, that when we walk into our first PMCA event and we're trying to like get knowledge, it can be a little intimidating, but that goes away really fast. I don't know if your experience was like that as well.
Oh, it's just slightly different than yours. I knew I was the least knowledgeable person in the room. I wasn't in the lower tier. I knew less than everybody else there. And yes, very intimidating. So it took me at least a good 2 years of conference. And then, you know, even between the two conferences, going back and looking at all the technical presentations that had been done on the subject of compound coatings. So
Right.
that really fueled my ambition to, you know, I was excited, I was motivated. And if it wasn't for those early technical papers in between conferences, you know, I probably would have lagged behind and maybe not even achieved what I would have achieved without them.
Right.
I know for a fact, I mean, and this is, I can say this with every bit of surety in my soul, you know, my achievement in the industry would not have been possible without PMCA and even organizations like AACT. But PMCA took the time to recognize that they have a wealth of information and they were willing to share. And not only were they willing to share the information, but they were very good at putting you in touch with people that actually worked and were doing the same things you were doing. And that's where the networking started to become such a very valuable aspect of my career path.
Without the PMCA, Ed Wilson is not Ed Wilson. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's a testimony to you and the organization, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I didn't realize it then. The realization really didn't start until a couple of years into when we moved to the Hershey Lodge, where you run into individuals like Ron Dixler. Well, I left U.S. Cocoa, which was then called Cocoa Barry, and I moved over into a new upshot confectionery oil supplier called Aarhus, a small Danish company. They also recognized the skills. My skills would be enhanced if I continued my endeavors with PMCA. And it was then that Ron Dixler looked at me and says, you know, I think you have a lot to offer here because there's a lot of people like yourself that are always coming in to the industry. And yeah, it's great to hear from experts, but it's really impactful if you hear from people that aren't experts, but are on a trend, that are making that pathway from limited knowledge to making sense of that knowledge to actually turning that into effective, you know, products in production. And so that's when I really started to go like, wow, this organization is more than just technical papers, you know. And the industry is, you know, I think the biggest benefit other than the individual is the industry. And it's pretty safe to say from all the connections that I've had through the years, when you see that connection between a PMCA employee, or excuse me, a PMCA member company that invests in employees to send them to PMCA, those employees have a high retention rate.
Right.
Because they come back and they grow with their knowledge, with their experiences. You know, so that was it. You know, PMCA was my cornerstone.
I mean, you've been in leadership positions. When was your first leadership position with the PMCA?
I think I became a board member. It was literally right before the time that Yvette joined PMCA. So I was on the board during the transition from D.D. Young to Yvette. So once I became a board member, that started to really even engage me more. And you know,
Right.
just my sheer amount of devotion to the organization in any capacity that I could help, it started to push me in that direction.
My experience is that, like you're talking about, it's a group of people that know a lot of stuff, and they want to give that information to other people so that those people have information and that they can share it with somebody else. And sometimes that's sharing with people in my workspace, right? So if I take a short course or I teach at a conference or whatever, and then I come back and I give it to the people I work with. And sometimes I am teaching or I am giving a presentation and I'm giving that away for free.
Early on, I find myself having discussions in cups of coffee with people that are willing to share, competitors that are doing the same thing I'm doing, they're willing to share with me some of the obstacles that they had to overcome to get to the level of, excellence that they wanted. And that, took me back for a bit, because I'm thinking like, instead of this competitor trying to either mislead me or have an advantage to not let me know anything, it was the complete opposite. Now, the unique part about those interchanges was you literally never shared proprietary information. You shared enough information to help the individual through a specific logjam or an understanding. Like, as you probably know, the first word I heard, tempering, and I'm hearing terms like POP and SOS. I mean, my mind was just like totally dizzy. What do all these letters mean? And it took me a long time to struggle through that with the help of industry colleagues.
And I think the PMCA in a lot of ways helps to reinforce the more I know, I don't know, but then helps to fill in the what I don't know with information, and reminds me that I don't have to know it. I don't have to know it all because somebody knows it. And now I have a resource to get that information. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, and because you have a piece of the puzzle, and you need to fill those other pieces to get more clarity of what the situation is. And that's where this networking dialogue with your colleagues, competitors, they just give you another piece, and then you grab another piece, and then all of a sudden, you start to form a process and a picture that really is, if I would have had to learn that whole process, either by starting with a food science degree and then going to work for a company that allowed me to build it up, would take twice as long, in my opinion.
Favorite memory?
Two favorite memories. Obviously, there's more than two, but the two that always jump to the back of my mind, one has to actually do with a presentation. So the first time I'm asked to get up and do a presentation, so I get all this just reams and reams of information from all this testing we had done. Now it's the time to go in front of the PMCA audience, and I am scared beyond belief. At this point, I have never stood up before, other than a class, in a classroom environment, never stood up with, 400 or 500 people in a room. I had at this point also had a little connection with Ed Seguin, who I totally respected. And I said, Ed, you make these things look just like you're talking to your family. You're seamless. And I think, Ed to this day continues to be just a fantastic presenter. I said, can you give me a couple of hinters? How do I try to, cover up my nervousness and be focused on the information? And I know we've heard this in other scenarios. He said, Ed, everybody in the audience is wearing underwear. So don't look at them. Don't look at their, the sheer numbers. Pick a few familiar faces and focus on them. Just move your eyes around a bit and just realize that they know less than you do. So at this point, you have to think that you're there to give them something they don't know. Now, some of them will know, and that's where, then I said, that's my next biggest obstacle. My God, what am I going to do when the Q&A session comes? Luckily, with Ed Seguin's support, I got through that. So then the second greatest moment was, and it's funny because I saw Rose mention this, the relief of that, the end of that night, when you go to the 4-bay lounge at the time in the lodge, it became the huge networking opportunity and relief. And then every night leaving the 4-bay lounge and then walking across the street to a wing and beer place called Your Place. And then just the people you would meet just doing that. And so those two points always come to the front of my mind as far as what PMCA did. It solidified me to be able to at least discuss something, and at the same point, unwind with colleagues and competitors at the end of it. And everybody being supportive, no matter how good or bad you were, everybody was supportive.
So Ed, I think we really met the first time, like we got to spend some time together last winter. I think it was last winter. the days
Yeah.
have all kind of blended together right now. But we got to spend some time together at the symposium about cannabis in confection.
You know, we did an awful lot of wordsmithing and trying to portray that this is not about promoting anything. This is more about technology and new ingredients and all the obstacles and issues that come with that ingredient, whether that ingredient can be a new high fiber component, a protein component, or in this case, an ingredient that had a vast and growing market that we felt if it's going to be in confections, we should be part of that education. So it's done as purely and as correctly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I attended, obviously, the company I work for, we are selling into that industry a lot these days. And I equated it to like listening to KYW, time, date, and temperature. Here's the information. Here are some industry experts in the information, the same way that in my head, I can say the organization is willing to give information about the benefits of trans fat, right? And whether, no matter how you feel about the trans fats, they have value. Our customers are using, or our membership is using them, and our customers are accepting them. Like there isn't a conversation about trans fats that way, right? And so I have personal opinions about cannabis, and they don't matter, right? But they are being used in confection, and I need to know more about them to help my company be primed for that channel and that industry. Is that fair?
Exactly, because when you stop and think about why are you attending a PMCA event? A PMCA event, which you touched on earlier, is all about education. If you don't have the proper education and discover different techniques, then there's a high chance of failure that's going to extend to small companies. And again, not like I say, endorsing anything, but you have to arm our members and our attendees with the basic conversation. We always try to say, don't focus on the ingredient, focus on the nuances on how to incorporate delicate and new and upcoming ingredients. I mean, when you think about it, in my whole year of tenure, the next most controversial thing, other than trans, as you were saying, were things like artificial flavors and colors and sugar substitutes. Those things were challenging at the time. And if organizations like PMCA didn't bring the resources of their members together to discuss them, they would have taken a lot longer to get into our manufacturer supply chain.
We're both Philly guys. And I think talking yesterday, we probably grew up 3 miles from each other, would be my bet.
Not far.
So we could talk about Philly, but I also want to talk about, we'll come back to Philly. I want to talk about trend. I mean, you're around the industry. What are some other trends you see in confection?
The trend that I really started to identify and try to analyze in depth is like, at what point in time does the palate change to look for more sophisticated and intense flavors? And so I started to really follow the trend, move to dark chocolate and the attributes, because now when you make the decision to move to dark chocolate, now you also peel back some layers and go like, well, now there's some nutritional and some healthy heart benefits along with just improved intense flavors.
Right.
So I think the trend in something like that, and now even today, even though milk chocolate still probably dominates the North American market, when you look at a lot of new products that are coming out now, there's a lot that incorporate dark semi-sweet chocolates, and now even more important, single origin cocos and flavors. So as your flavor profile, as you get older, you strive to get more intensity in whatever you're eating, whether it's, in my case, I use the example, I switched from Maxwell House coffee to Starbucks, just because I want that impact. Same reason I've moved to dark chocolate. But I also want to now move dark chocolate into even more healthier platforms, and whether it be the keto or whatever the other, technical brands that are coming out, it's how do we grow with those new things and still become a very viable component of that. And I don't want to make this all about chocolate. Look at what started out to be just a simple jelly bean. And now the multitudes of experiences you can get from eating a jelly bean. And it always, once I started to get more in product development, I can remember having a lot of conversations with a gentleman at Jelly Belly. Wouldn't a jelly bean be great if we had like a fat-based center? Because now I'm in the fat side of the business. And I can remember the conversations, and they're going like, no way. It's never going to happen. I said, I'm sure you can find a fat and process where we can put it in the center of a jelly bean. And lo and behold, that conversation was probably about 20 years ago. And now you see those types of innovations coming into non-chocolate categories as well. The gummies, I mean, look at the extent of gummies. Now they're looking at fortifying gummies.
All right, so I ask everyone this question, and you're at the airport, right? You're like, you got a couple minutes before your flight, so you stop in to buy the newspaper and you grab a bottle of water and you're walking to the register and you're in the confection section, like mass market confection. You're going to buy one item to snack on the plane. What do you get?
All right, so I will get to the one. I have a check down process. If there's a dark chocolate Kit Kat, I'm picking it up. Just the dark chocolate.
Okay. All right.
If that's not there, I'm going for the Lindt Excellence bar. And that's my choice, the dark.
All right, we'll just go with the dark chocolate Kit Kat bar, because the Lindt Excellence is leaning a little over the mass market candy aisle.
But a lot of places don't carry the dark chocolate Kit Kat. And
that is true.
To this day, that annoys me.
Okay, right. I'm a Kit Kat guy, right? I had a customer tell me, Kit Kat or Hershey is looking for 500 people to be their official tasters, and it's a contest. So I've got to figure that out. Like, I got to figure out where I can apply to be that guy.
I'm trying to apply. I've already sent a few emails to people within Hershey. I think that would be a phenomenal experience.
My last Philly story for you, because I need help with this one. So my grandparents lived in East Falls, and my grandfather used to work for, he was in publishing, and he was that classic Philadelphia grandfather. You know what I mean? The old Irish guy, the whole thing. Right? On their coffee table lived a coconut egg. We were allowed a slice of this coconut egg. And then it lived under glass, right? And I feel like that coconut egg was there from Ash Wednesday until like 3 weeks after Easter, which means there had to be more than one coconut egg, right? But you wanted the first slice because it was kind of crunchy on one side and it was squishy on the other side. And to this day, I don't know where that coconut egg was from, but this would have been like 1977.
Well, I have a very similar experience. So mine was the Zittner coconut cream egg, because like you said, if you slice the first piece off, you get the creaminess. If you come back 6 hours later or the next day, and my sister would take the second slice, now you have that texture of the crunchiness on one side and the creaminess on the other.
Was Zittner a Philadelphia brand? Well, Ed, thanks a bunch for spending an hour of your day with us today. This has been great. I've learned a ton, and it was a pleasure hearing your story. And thank you.
No, you're quite welcome. And I say you're welcome because, again, this is a true passion for me. I would not have had the success in my industry without PMCA from the beginning. And not only from the beginning, but even as I got more educated, more savvy, up until the last conference, I come away every conference learning something new. So I'm not done learning. And I'm sort of done working full time, but I'm certainly not done learning. And I can't say, before you go, I really have to give kudos to our current slate of officers and our staff.
I thought of one more question. Whiz or no whiz?
Oh, no whiz. American or provolone. Now, I won't turn down one with whiz, but if I'm present, my preference is still going to be American cheese, double cheese, or provolone.
I'm a provolone guy. All right, ladies, we're done. We're done like walking down memory lane. We're done. We've solved all the world's problems. We're done talking. We don't have any technical issues at the end. We're good.
This has been great. I really, it was very interesting. I enjoyed it.